I think India with AI is that market, and what you do to India will be the playbook everywhere else. So this is the idea that look, we have a seat at the table, maybe not in building models, but we will be the largest use case of AI in the world, where the difference in their lives is so tangible that people will actually want to pay for AI. They may not be able to pay $20 a month, they may pay 20 rupees a month or 200 rupees a month, but if you can make it work at that price point, just like we made UPI and other things work at that price point, you're unlocking something massive, right? But we missed that point.
Hi, wherever you're joining us, I hope you're doing well. Welcome to Startup Fridays, conversations with accomplished entrepreneurs and VC investors. I'm Haryakli, and in this episode, Tanuj Bhojwani, head of people+ai, a non-profit effort that's working to find population-scale applications of artificial intelligence that are relevant to large problems in India, does a quick recounting of how the initiative was seeded. In this conversation, which I hope will be the first of many on AI for India, Tanuj also gives us a quick overview of the 4 main objectives at people+ai. Tanuj, thank you for making time for this conversation. I've been looking forward to learning more about people+ai for quite a while. And of course, I want to know about yourself and your journey as well. Maybe we can simply start with how people+ai came about, and we'll go from there.
Sure. There's 2 threads to the story. One is me personally. I have been part of the DPI ecosystem, and since the UPI days, I used to have a drone startup, right? And the drone startup didn't do very well because the government came in, this new technology, and said, look, we're banning it, right, till further notice. That ban was really bad for business, right? And it came from fear, what can drones do, what will happen, what if, everywhere there are drones all the time and things go really terrible, and the drone flying all the time, they'll crash into things, do whatever. 10 years later, none of that has come true. In no jurisdiction, right? Not even in India, for sure, where the drones ban operated for a long time, but even in other places where drones were allowed partially, things have been mostly okay. But we did, through that ban and through various other sort of, I would say, not so great policy moves, managed to kill an industry, right? Like that cost is very real. It is being revived now in 2021-22 after the Prime Minister, I think, went abroad and saw how drones were changing the landscape of military and defense. And you might have heard about the Bakhtiar drones and like a bunch of stuff that has been happening, etc. So the technology has has changed like geopolitical calculus also, right? Like countries can take on, F-15s, F-16s, whatever, right? Like $50 million aircrafts versus these whatever, a few 100,000 at best dollar drones, and really changes the calculus of everything. But also in agricultural spraying, in productivity in other places, image mapping, etc. So a few of us could see the potential and wanted to have that, but the policy space was not very useful, or not very supportive of that kind of ambition, and there was a complete ban. So I had to shut down my business, and I started asked who has had more success working with the government than I did, right? Because that's something I need to learn. Literal rocket science is easier than trying to, get policy around technology, right?
How long ago was your drone company?
This was 2014.
Okay.
I started in 2014. Did my best till about 2016. Had massive debt because classic small business working with large corporations mistake. I put in my own capital and money before I got paid, and then they refused to pay when it was a road construction project, highway construction project. So that got stalled because of right-of-way issues. So my takeaway from all of that somewhere, when I was reflecting, and immediately after, right, when I had to shut down in 2016, was, the government and policy, the highway construction business, I was trying to do that. Solar parks, I was trying to do drones for that. And of course, we're doing drones for films and this and that, which is standard. Services business, very good. I realized that the bottleneck that I didn't know how to break through was government, these large corporations. And so I asked who has better luck with the government than I do. And a lot of people ended up pointing me to this ecosystem here in Bangalore with Nandan and, at the time, a bunch of folks around him, Pramod, Sanjay Jain, etc., were working on this new thing that nobody really quite understood. They were like, also had a very weird name, right? Unified Payments Interface, right? And I was like, yeah, that's a very tech geeky way of naming something. It's a Unified Payments Interface, and UPI. I was working on that in 2016. So I came here, I started volunteering in 2016. And then a series of events, demonetization, this, that, etc. And the work that I was doing suddenly became like very center stage, right? In the sort of discourse of the country, right? UPI during that time, payment systems, etc. I started really enjoying what I do, and I started realizing that, okay, building population scale systems is a whole other thing. What I was doing in startups and tech, this is also tech, but it's just a very, very different starting point, a very, very different set of assumptions. So like people will like to say UPI as a platform, or all these DeepI things as a platform. It is, it's not, you're not wrong. But there is something more than just the tech, right? There is a philosophy of how you do it. There is, you're not really raising funding or doing anything. So you're just doing it in a very different way. So that was the work that I got into in 2016, and I've basically been here ever since. I've been working with all these distinguished people who, some of them came from the Aadhaar project, other people we've picked up along the way, and like me who's joined, etc. And we've gotten very sort of very invested in this way of thinking that we call the DPI way of thinking, the DPI philosophy, digital public infrastructure, for those who still haven't heard of DPIs. And that is thinking about how do you build technology for the people, that serves the people, and serves especially a country like India, where it's not like payment systems didn't exist. Credit cards existed for 60, 70 years. And they've also been evolving. They're not a static product from 70 years ago, right? Like, the embossing, the magnetic strips, then chip and pin, there's a bunch of security and other convenience, and now tap to pay, convenience improvements in cards as well. But somehow none of these technologies worked for India, right? They never had that penetration and growth. And so when you think about the Indian context and design systems from the ground up, like Aadhaar, like UPI, DigiLocker, etc., we saw what technology can do in a country that everybody had written off, and the logic was we'll have to wait for India to become as rich as the West, and then they'll emulate the solution, right? Today it's just a poorer America, right? Like that's how people would, or tech people also look at it. And yeah, there's a thin slice of people who will actually want that Uber or want that Ola and whatever. So poorer America, right? We have a thin slice and then a large bottom of the pyramid. But we believe differently. We believe, you're just not designing solutions for the scale. So that is the thread I'm coming from. I've been doing this for 7-8 years. I end up, in that meeting Nandan, we started having an equation. I wrote a book with him, and in 2022 that book came out. Very pandemic book, The Art of Bitfulness. But I co-authored that, so a bunch of ambitions had been checked, and I kind of like went on a break, right, in 2022, mid 2022. And that time, by late 2022, while I was still figuring out, okay, what should my next move be, this new technology breaks into the scene, right? ChatGPT is launched in November, and late November, and in December first week, in fact December 1st, I think I sent an email to a bunch of people. Vivek Raghavan, current co-founder of Sarvam, Nandan, Shankar, a bunch of these people, and said, folks, have you checked out this tool, right? It is pretty crazy. And I got it to write an essay on the India stack, right? Like as the first thing I did. So on December 1st, I have this email, and I sent this to Nandan and others, and Nandan replied saying, hire this bot, right? That was his 3-word reply, tongue in cheek. But so somewhere all of us kind of knew it in our guts that this is going to be big. Now, and I started thinking about what can we do with this technology, right? In the meanwhile, so did EkStep. EkStep is the organization I was mentioning where people+ai is housed. EkStep started putting together, they had already been working on AI, right? Like ChatGPT sort of brought it into the forefront, but they had been working on language tech investments, AI for Bharat since 2019 and a bunch of other things. We were trying old ML methods, etc. The whole LLM driven frenzy was not there, but we said, okay, this is there. Our existing DPI stuff is there. Let's just show what all of this come together can do. And they put together a show on April 1st, where they displayed what is happening in AI in India. What else can happen? Like
which year of April?
Yeah, April 2023.
23. Okay.
Yeah. So April 1st, 2023, they do an event at the Leela. Some 400 people show up. Obviously, by now in April, like November, ChatGPT launches. By April, the hype is there. It's everywhere, right? Everybody and their uncles are talking about AI in tech. So April 2023, we are basically doing this event and we're showing people the power of what is possible. And in that event, it becomes very abundantly clear that this is going to change, right? And the people are excited about that change. So we said, okay, we need to harness this and put this together, right? And what do we do? So that organization, which answers what is population scale thinking, what is the DPI way of thinking in AI, needs to exist and somebody needs to run it. Since I was on this break and I was basically the most, the Hindi word is lukha, right, at the time. Also, it was my interest in things I've done. I used to do in my in my drone startup, we used to do ML on top of the images coming out of a drone, right? So I had some experience in doing this. And after that November email and that December email that I had sent, I had been getting my hands dirty again, right? Like I had gotten back to coding. I had all the time in the world. I had nothing else to do. So earlier when I would not find it very high leverage, right, for me to sit and write the code because somebody better can do it better than me. But I mean, I knew how to do it. But that December to April period was also really good for me because I had nothing going on. So I could actually get into it and do it. And the more you actually play with these things, the more you actually try to build applications around it, you understand both the potential but the challenges, right? So that is the phase that I was in. So, conversation with Nandan, he basically said, look, we need to answer this sort of question, right? What is the UPI of AI? What is the DPI in AI? Why don't you do this? So that's where people+ai gets started. Like really in June of 23, I joined, 1st June 2023. And since then, we've just been trying to refine what are we doing and how are we doing it, etc. So we'll almost be at a year. It will very soon be a year of people+ai, at least for me. And in that year, I think we've done enough experiments, enough conversations. We have enough proof points to know that what we do now is of service to the country. It is going to lead to these certain outcomes, all of which we'll talk about. But this is the origin story, right? Like on one hand, EkStep has been thinking about some of these initiatives, and I individually have that DPI history. I was in the orbit of all of these things. So the two threads meet on in that June sort of timeline when like I was about to do something in AI and I wanted to sort of build experiments on top of this and to see what happens. And sort of Nandan sort of connected the dots and says, why don't you do this with EkStep?
I mean, briefly for people who might be curious about these kinds of things, for now, people+ai is working more like a non-profit experiment. At some point, you might move it or spin off startups, etc. How will that?
Look, okay, let's step back and let me tell you a little more about who we are, what we do, and why, and how do I answer that question. I think this is a strange new technology, right? It's different from what has come before. I want to be able to put my finger on it, but like partly, I think one thing that everybody agrees and is also the challenge is that we're not quite sure how it works, right? We're sure that it works. It's more of a statistical outcome and like a quasi-probabilistic process rather than a very deterministic outcome. There is ways of it being deterministic. You set the temperature to 0, you give the same inputs, you give the same outputs. Like there is still math under all of this. It's not magic, but it is probabilistic, and it is a system whose interpretability of what is happening, what's going wrong is something we don't understand yet. And this is scales and orders of magnitudes that are actually very hard to comprehend for any human mind, right? So the machine is kind of getting it, kind of approximating intelligence the way that you and I understand it, but not in the precise way that you and I understand it, right? So there's a certain element of unknown here. So really what people+ai is that in the face of such newfound sort of thing in which whose both potential and limits are untested, we are the incubation center for population scale ideas that really test these theories to come out with, more fully baked, or at least more than half baked ideas of what can be done, which will act as the UPI for the country, or in AI or whatever. I keep going back to that reference because just to give your readers an example, we obviously internally have a much more nuanced definition of what we're trying to do. But what are the population scale solutions in AI, and how do they benefit the country, right? That's the core question we're asking. Now that may look like a startup that somebody else runs. That may look like a DPI like UPI that some government organization like an NPC or quasi-government organization like NPCI, Section 8 company, or ONDC, Section 8 company runs. It may also look like just a paper, right, or a protocol or a standard that we publish on a GitHub and let open source contributors maintain it. It may also look like a simple document, right? Hey, if you're building for AI in India, here are the things you must watch out for. Here is the thing. It may look like data sets, right? Oh, okay. Like, I'll give you a simple example. Somebody needs to make a data set, right? This is both controversial but also critical, of all the possible ways that you can insult somebody in every language, in every dialect. But if you don't have that somewhere, how do you stop systems from using that, right? If let's say somebody comes with a clever, cute AI tool, which is happy birthday greeting tool, right? Wish your friends happy birthday, right? And they do something and they send it to you. And somebody figures out a way to do prompt injection to, not just call you, that this person in a very cute robotic voice says happy birthday, but then calls you a racial slur or something that, is in the dialect of, you speak Kannada if you're from Mysore, right? Maybe there is a way or an insult in Kannada that the developers from Gurgaon don't even know can happen. And I can trick the bot into calling you that as it's wishing you a happy birthday. Right now, is each developer in the country going to sit and think about this and make that list, or can that be a public good, right? So there are many, many things that need to be done to get to a vision of what we call an Adbhut India, which is amazing India. It's one of the Navratras, right? It's the feeling of awe and wonder. So we're saying that India can go to an Adbhut India if we do the right set of things with this technology, operate with the right philosophy. And people+ai as a house for those experiments where the things and the philosophy is discovered and refined. So at the broadest level, right? So therefore, we'll try to remain a not-for-profit, because the way we do these things, the various things that I told you, we need to have a trusted relationship with what we like to call Samaj, Sarkar and Bazaar. We need to have trusted relationship with civil society organizations, with academics, researchers, who are more concerned with, let's say, safety and responsible AI and ethics. We need to have a trusted relationship with the government, who has the scale to chase population scale missions, right, and the resources to do it. And, and they have a different set of needs, I would say. And ultimately, we need to have a deep relationship with the market, right? Because your VCs, your entrepreneurs, they are the expression of the state of the art in a technology like this. They need to go out there and prove that this technology is creating value for the people, and therefore the people will actually pay. And then on that basis, all those dollars go back, right? Like the VC funds earn returns, those dollars go back to the next and the next business, right? And we've seen this play out in the last 15 years. When I started my first company in 2011, things were kind of bleak, right? Like it wasn't easy to get funding, get support, do whatever. Today, there's a TV show, right, Shark Tank, where people go and kids are getting funding pretty early into their journey also. So yeah, I mean, we're an ecosystem enabler. We will continue to remain a not-for-profit in whatever form we are. If a particular idea matures, let's say an open compute cloud, one of the ideas we're working on, open cloud compute, one of the ideas we're working on, OCC, if that scales up and needs, let's say, a few $1 million a year of funding, something that we can't provide, that might spin off into its own NGO and its own not-for-profit, right? Some other initiative might spin off. So we are like that incubator, or if I may say YC of population scale ideas, we're not giving money and taking equity. It's not the model here. What we are giving is all the support, network, thoughts that we can to help these people grow. And in return, what we're asking for is, hey, please remember that you got this support, so pay it forward, right? Like, try to create a enabling ecosystem. If we can just create that goodwill in the environment, we help each other. I think that is the real difference that I see in the Valley and here. It's not that they have better ideas. They have a little more money than us, I would say, a lot more money than us, to be fair. They don't have better people. We, I think, still have the better people, and so our people who go there and make their companies better. But there is a culture that is undeniably there in the Valley that I don't think that India has managed to really pull together. And that culture is one where we see the bigger picture. We see that if we all, there is competition. We're all working for some of the same things. But if we work together, what we can achieve, that sum is much greater than, the whole is much greater than the sum of the parts. And that's the sort of thing that people say is trying to do, right? Is join the dots, be a network, bring it all together. Sorry, yes, I think I've gone sort of very deep.
This is nice narrative. I think it's important to capture this. Increasingly I'm inspired by, the oral history in the computer history museum, amazing series.
Yeah.
And so I sort of aspired to build a little series of my own with entrepreneurs and folks like you in India.
That's a very interesting thing you say, because at some point I'll come to the actual four, like all of this is philosophical, but nice to say, nice to discuss, but like, hey, on a day-to-day basis, what do you do, right? So we have a set of 4 things we do. The 4th one is essentially what you're saying. I'll just go over them very quickly. We'll keep coming back. This theme will keep coming back. So let me just say the 4 once and then we'll come back to it. The 4 things we do is, number 1, discover and disseminate population scale use cases for AI in India. It's the very first thing we do. What is this technology going to be used for? What is the point? How does it really help us? And how does it really help the country in the context of the major problems we have? Number 2 is infrastructure. We have to build infrastructure that supports those population scale use cases, right? Let's suppose we discover that, okay, we can use AI to, let's say, do a second opinion on diagnosis for healthcare, right? So even before you go to the hospital, you talk to your phone and it tells you, look, this probably is what's up with you, and I'd recommend you can go to the hospital within the next 1 to 3 days. Or, hey, this sounds bad, go now. Or, okay, you can probably try a few home remedies before you go there. And just triaging healthcare better, right? Let's say this is a great use case, but maybe this requires then everybody to have that power of that AI next to them. Where is the compute going to come from, right? When you get into compute, you start realizing that the way that the West and China have scaled with these massive data centers consuming a massive amount of energy may not work for India, for reasons that have nothing to do with whether we have the technology or the manpower or whatever, but maybe because we don't have the power, right? So if you have to put up a 300 megawatt data center, which is also, in the larger scheme of things, not too big, right? Because sort of India is still 1/10 of what the US is in terms of data center capacity. So adding a 300, and we're at some, I think 1000 something megawatts, and like the gap is huge. So adding 300 megawatts, which is adding about 20% or a little less than 20% of the capacity in one major center, sounds like a good plan. We should do it. Except they want to do it in New Bombay. The people who were evaluating this found the land, which is also very hard, found permissions, willpower, found somebody to do it, manage it, found the capital. And then the question is, apparently, this is what they told me, I haven't done my research on this, but they told me that the city of Bombay uses 3000 megawatts total, so 3 gigawatts of energy. So you're telling me that you're going to put up something in the next 1 year which takes 10% of the city's supply, right? BEST, the BESCOM equivalent there, would just be like, sorry, that's not going to happen, right? So there's challenges at every level and scale which go even beyond technology. So So that when we say that, oh, India should invest, we should buy, why are we not buying 100,000 GPUs, right? Meta has 600,000 GPUs. Why are we not buying 100,000 GPUs? I'm like, sure, but where's the power going to come from?
And at that scale, captive power probably doesn't make sense.
Yeah. It's exactly at that scale, captive power doesn't make sense because then you're in two businesses. You're in a data center business and a power plant business, right? And if there's one thing that I have learned, whether it is writing a book or running a business or running a not-for-profit or like anything, is that must focus. You need to know what business you're in, and if you're not, you should be doing the things that are the most highest leverage and strategic for you. And so therefore, getting a data center business to also be a power plant is a bad idea. So what is the India data center strategy then? How do we get compute? Rather not data center, but compute strategy. How do we get compute? And the answers are that we get it not in this mega way, right? At least that's our thesis. We get it as a network of micro, and that's what OCC is. I got into deep. I was back to the 4 things we do. So I'll repeat once again somewhere so that you can. 4 things we do. Number 1, we discover and disseminate use cases at population scale. Number 2, we build infrastructure to support those use cases. Number 3, this is going to be an interdisciplinary problem. The people who know AI don't know what is happening on the ground in rural healthcare. So you have to create that spaces for collaboration, and someone needs to be that trusted partner who can get a bazaar and a sarkar and a samaj into the same room, right? And that's what people+ai aspires to be, just open spaces for collaboration. And that's why our office and our house is, it's more of a hacker house vibe that we're trying to create, and anybody can walk in and work from here. Number 4 is cheerlead, right? And essentially what we're trying to do is that it's really strange to me that even the startups in Bangalore, the language they use of how to go about doing this comes from the valley. So it's the same, 0 to 1. Right now, there's a -1 to 0 is happening, right? People have taken that idea, 0 to 1. That's become lower here in Bangalore. Move fast and break things. First principles thinking, right? Even the way we talk to each other about how to do this is taken from there. So of course our startups are built for there. And of course therefore there are more startups successful from India selling to the US in GTM there than here. Because we don't, like you're talking about this oral history, right? We don't, as rich as the Indian philosophical tradition is, as much as Amartya Sen said, the argumentative Indian, we love discussing and debating. We don't seem to want to, in the startup and tech culture, do it for ourselves. Right? We want to borrow and try to force fit. And DPIs have shown that just doesn't work. If you just make a few tweaks based on the actual context and conditions of this country, you can create population scale solutions. Like UPI is now being exported. So if we stop talking like them and start talking about us, I do think we can make a difference. So the 4th vertical is just we put people who are doing radical things and great things and India-focused things and have an India way of doing things. We put them back in the center. If somebody has ideas for India, we put them back in the center, right? We use our platform to give them and those ideas and those startups attention, because I think we need to start this. We need to start looking at, sure, we don't have as many GPUs. Sure, we don't have like somebody writing $500 million checks at $2 billion valuations for a company that started yesterday. Sure, we don't have that. But we have a lot going on, right? Doesn't mean we don't get a seat at the table. We will get a seat at the table if we have an India-specific strategy, right? And this is where the event we had on 7th May, where we put out that strategy, right? And the strategy is the Adbhut India strategy, right? Where we make a bold claim of what we'll end up doing by Jan 1st, 2031. And I do think we'll get there, right? So we just have to be confident in our ability, especially now, especially with the proof points of UPI, of all these other things that have been built, that we can do this, right? And it's going to be where the opportunity is. It's just like how America with its consumption and manufacturing, and after they were done with their selling cars to everybody in America, they wanted to sell cars to China, right? And sell other things to China, and Coca-Cola and McDonald's and burgers to China, and then other countries in Southeast Asia that are developing. I think India with AI is that market. And what you do to India will be the playbook everywhere else. So this is the idea that, look, we have a seat at the table. Maybe not in building models, but we will be the largest use case of AI in the world, where people, the difference in their lives is so tangible, and people will actually want to pay for AI. They may not be able to pay $20 a month, they may pay 20 rupees a month or 200 rupees a month, but if you can make it work at that price point, just like we made UPI and other things work at that price point, you're unlocking something massive, right? But we miss that point because we obviously sort of, our stories and cultures and media, everything revolves around what's happening in this 50 square kilometer patch of land on the west coast of the US, right? So that's what we're trying to establish in that event.
What was the word you used for the fourth one? Cheering. What is it?
Cheerleading.
Cheerleading. All right.
I think of it as a media vertical also. It's essentially, while I will put out prototypes, experiments, protocols, open source, open data, open models if we get the resources to do it, I would also like to put out stories. Stories are powerful. They travel, right? And somewhere there is, just like I was at one point in time, 21, 22, and eager to go out and do something. But if I go online and search for the stories, right, and heroes,
right,
and all I see are Western heroes, and even the Indian heroes repeating the Western ideals, trying to emulate those, right? I am going to jump to that, right? I am going to want to be that person.
Right.
I want to flip that. I want to make sure that we put out, local heroes who've taken that contrarian view and built something for India and it's worked for India, right? And those stories, I'm sorry, but we are starved of them, right? I feel like the Bangalore tech class does not appreciate, because they're so connected globally, like just taking off, there's a direct flight from here to the valley, right? And so many of us have friends there, and you kind of feel like you're in both boats. So you actually feel like it's the same thing. I'm there, I'm here, it's the same thing. I'm a globally integrated citizen. But I think there is a need for local stories to give a very different archetype for what an Indian founder can do, can be, what success looks like.
Yeah. So again, just for our audience, can you quickly recap the announcement about what the strategy is going to be, what you want to do by 2031 Jan 1st?
Sure. So we had an event where we decided, okay, look, we've done a lot of work under the hood, and it's time to take it out there. And one of the big things I wanted to shake is exactly this, right? I think a lot of people in India believe that AI won't come out of India, right? Nahi hoga. We can't do it, right? A lot of people in the audience come for an AI event, sitting there, and still skepticism is there. So I want to share them that, boss, you are wrong. You are wrong both that it will happen, but also you are wrong that it is happening. It's happening right under your noses and you're not paying attention. So that was what the event was about. It was to celebrate, to cheerlead Indian AI, right? And also put out a vision for the future. The vision for the future is what we call an Adbhut India. An India where this new technology has created a future that is, helpful for all Indians, not just a few, which is, if you follow the Valley parts and the Valley business models, we'll end up creating the same premium products and, like $20 a month subscriptions, right, for AI. And everybody will be like, yeah, that is a business model in AI. What else is there? That's the way to make money. And sure, some of that will still happen and should happen. India does have some very rich people, and a lot of them are a good market. But if you look at the list of problems that we have to solve for India, from healthcare to education to clean water to manual scavenging, right? Like for all these problems, AI can help. But we are currently not helping. It's not working. In those problems, you want to make progress. How do we do it? And that's what people+ai was saying, that we do 4 things and this is how we're going to do it. And also our strategy. What should our strategy about thinking about AI be? So while others are in the race for AGI, bigger and better and more sort of intelligent models, we're like, hey, the technology that exists today out in the open is good enough to make significant progress on all the problems I just told you, education, healthcare, etc. Who is focusing their energy not on becoming the next OpenAI or the next Mistral or the next whatever, but focusing on, with an OpenAI or with a Mistral or with the third one, Anthropic, whoever else, how can the population of India be benefited? Right? So we saw that as a white space. We took that up, and that's what we announced, that like we're going to do that. The argument that I made for an Adbhut India is that India will be the AI use case capital of the world. It's not a very far-fetched statement. We're already the biggest users of, Facebook, for example. So anything online, and YouTube, we're the largest group of users. Anything online, India, by sheer size, is always there. Anything online will become AI. India will also be there. But that's kind of missing the essence of the point. Right? So that's the easy way for me to win. Like I said, AI use case capital of the world, and look, we are the largest user of YouTube. YouTube has become AI. Right? That's one easy way of winning this argument. But that's not what substantively what I'm saying is different. I'm saying that the West will come up with AI use cases for a life that is already pretty much solved. The use cases of AI then become about, let's say, an entertainment, right? Like the videos you make and whatever you see. There's a lot that they'll do there. There's a lot of business and transactions and formal economy already there. So these assistants and co-pilots and managing stuff will happen. In India, today, there's a lot of people who've not experienced being online. So the way that you and I use a Google or use a Twitter, if I put a gun to your head and said, you can't use Google unless you pay $20 a month, you might even cough up if you can, right? A lot of Indians have not had that experience yet of the internet or of their devices. They're like these machines they can sometimes use to do WhatsApp, video calling, whatever, but they don't fully experience the potential of what computing can do. With AI, the barriers for them to use that will fall. And the barriers for them to access hard to access services like healthcare, education, skilling will also fall. Which means with AI for Indians, where for an American you went from having all this already to having a her-like assistant who's mildly flirting with you in Scarlett Johansson's voice apparently, and you're using her to automate stuff in a fairly reasonably sort of working system, as opposed to an Indian, the average Indian, not you and me, who did not even have access to healthcare, not even have access to a doctor, can now pull out their phone, describe their symptoms in their own language, in the privacy of their home. Even if they can't read or write, they can do it by voice. And they actually get access to healthcare. Right? The shift and the change in the lifestyle and what it does for someone in India is going to be dramatically more than it will be for somebody in the US. So when I say India will be the AI use case capital by Jan 1st, by end of the decade, which means by Jan 1st, 2031, I mean that more Indians will be using it, that's obvious. But more Indians will be using it in more substantive ways to improve their lives, to increase their incomes, right? In a way that the West simply doesn't have the need for, right? And they have these regulatory systems and healthcare data, etc. They will take a lot more to crack it. So the lack of legacy systems once again works in our favor, right? And we'll also have to think about how to make these systems responsible from day one, right? As opposed to the West, which already has a bunch of application-specific sort of provisions and regulations, and the AI has to fit into that. We have a blank slate. We get to rewrite the rules and play this game very, very differently. And the interesting part to me is that if we do it in India, we are actually we're leading the pack on the developing world, right? What you do in India for 1.5 billion people here, you can then replicate for 1.5 billion people in Africa, and another like 1.5 billion people who are in the developing state, the rest of the world, right? So from India, what you innovate, from the value what you can innovate, you can take to Europe, you can take to Australia, a few other developing nations, and they have the same context. But our context is the context for about 5 to 6 billion people. So I really think that people are missing the point, right? Of why India going to Adbhut India is going to be a massive shift in the tech world.